The doors of the Harrington Medical Clinic swung open, and every head in the waiting room turned. Not because of the noise. The doors were quiet, the kind of quiet that only expensive hinges make. They turned because of what walked through them. 3 black SUVs, pulling up to the curb outside, a man in a charcoal suit stepping out. First, then another. Then a woman in heels clicking against the pavement like a countdown. Inside, behind the frosted glass of her private office, Dr. Renata Osei Mills pressed her fingers together and watched. Let me tell you how we got here. It was a Tuesday in November, and the wind off Lake Ontario had teeth that morning. Okafor Street smelled like exhaust and the damp wool of people who'd been waiting outside too long. Tivona Asare had been awake since 4:30, not because she wanted to be, because the boiler in her building on Dufferin had gone out again, and her daughter Lila slept better when Tivona kept moving. Walking the length of the apartment, reheating the same cup of tea, pressing a warm cloth against Lila's chest to ease the cough that had been sitting there like an unwelcome guest since October. Lila was 6. She had her father's nose and her grandmother's stubbornness, and a laugh that made strangers on the bus turn around and smile without knowing why. She also had a cough that had lasted 23 days, a low fever that came and went like it was paying rent, and a mother who had taken her to a walk-in clinic on Bloor 2 weeks ago, then a second one on Dundas, and been told both times that it was probably viral, probably nothing, probably just the change of seasons. Probably. Tivona had learned to hate that word. She worked nights at a food processing plant in Etobicoke, packaging, quality check, whatever they needed, 12-hour shifts, twice a week, with a few day shifts picked up here and there when the scheduling manager felt generous. She made it work. She always made it work. Back in Kumasi, her mother had raised 4 children on less, and Tivona had watched her do it without complaint, and without the kind of quiet desperation that she herself now felt some mornings. Standing in a kitchen with bare cupboards and a sick child and a phone that kept buzzing with bills she'd already organized into a folder by due date, because that was the one thing she could control. She had a folder. That was what she had. She'd heard about the Harrington Clinic from a woman at the plant named Denise, who'd heard about it from someone else. It's not free, Denise had said, but they do payment plans. And the doctor there, the one who runs it, she actually listens. That last part was what stayed with Tivona, not the payment plan that she could figure out. It was the listening. She had not felt listened to in a long time. The clinic was in the Annex, on a street lined with old maples that had gone bare. It looked like it had once been a townhouse, red brick, white trim, a small sign by the door with the clinic's name in simple lettering. Nothing flashy. Nothing that said we are important the way some places did, with their glass lobbies and their digital check-in screens. This place looked like it had been there a long time and planned to stay. Tivona pushed through the door with Lila on her hip. Lila had her face buried in Tivona's shoulder, the way she did when she was tired and uncertain. She was holding the small, carved wooden elephant that Tivona's mother had mailed from Ghana 2 Christmases ago. The paint rubbed off the ears from where Lila held it. The trunk smooth as glass. The waiting room was small. 6 chairs along the wall, a children's corner in one end with a plastic bin of toys, a desk behind a partition where a receptionist sat. The woman at the desk had short hair and reading glasses and did not look up when Tivona came in. Name, she said, Tivona Asare. I called yesterday. I have an appointment at 9:15 for my daughter, Lila. The receptionist typed something. Health card. Tivona reached into her bag. Not a large bag, not the kind, with compartments and zippers and its own organization system, just a canvas tote from a grocery store that she'd been using for 3 years because it held everything she needed, and pulled out her wallet. She slid the health card across the desk. The receptionist looked at it. Then she looked at Tivona. Then she looked at Lila, who had turned her head just slightly to peek at the waiting room with one cautious eye. "This card expired in August," the woman said. "I know. I applied for the renewal in September. They said 6 to 8 weeks. It's November. I know." Tivona kept her voice level. She had practice. "I have the confirmation letter from Service Ontario. I have it here." She reached back into the tote. "That doesn't help us today." Tivona stopped. "I'm sorry. Without a valid health card, we can't process the OHIP billing. You'd have to pay out of pocket for today's visit. The consultation fee is $340. Tivona looked at the woman. Lila shifted on her hip. From somewhere in the waiting room behind her, a chair creaked. "I've been coming here for 2 weeks trying to get an appointment," Tivona said quietly. "My daughter has had a fever on and off for 3 weeks. I have the renewal confirmation. I understand. But our policy, can I speak to the doctor? Dr. O.C. Mills is fully booked today. If you can't provide payment, I'd suggest going to a walk-in." There it was. The suggestion that translated to, "This place is not for you." Tivona had heard it before in other forms. She'd heard it in the way people paused before answering her in certain offices, in the way she'd sometimes stand at a counter and watch the person's eyes drift past her shoulder to the person behind. She was used to it in the abstract. She was not used to it with Lila on her hip, Lila with her 23-day cough and her carved wooden elephant, and her 6 years of absolute trust that her mother would fix things. "It is -8 degrees outside," Tivona said. "We took the 29 bus and the 94. My daughter has not stopped coughing since last night. I have the government letter confirming my card is being renewed. I'm asking for 30 minutes with a doctor. I'm sorry, I can't help you today." The receptionist went back to her screen. Tivona stood there for a moment. She did not make a scene. She was not the kind of person who made scenes, not because she lacked the feeling, but because she'd learned early that scenes cost more than they were worth, and the bill always came to her. She pulled Lila a little closer, smoothed the back of her coat, and turned to find a chair. "Ma'am," the receptionist's voice was flat. Not unkind exactly, but final, the way a door sounds when it locks from the other side. "The chairs are for patients with confirmed appointments." Tivona turned back. "We have a confirmed appointment. Without valid coverage or payment, I can't process you as a patient today. So where do you suggest we wait?" The woman gestured, briefly, toward the door. "Outside, in -8, with a 6-year-old who had been coughing since 4:30 that morning." The man in the chair nearest the desk, maybe 50, a scarf still around his neck, a paper cup of coffee in his hands, looked up at that moment. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it again. He looked down at his coffee. The waiting room was very quiet. Tivona walked to the door. She held it open with her back, adjusted Lila on her hip, and stepped outside into the cold. There was a bench on the pavement, metal, the kind that held the November air like a vessel. She sat down on it because her legs needed to be somewhere. Lila pressed her face into her mother's neck. The carved elephant was squeezed between them. "Mama?" Lila said. "Are we going to see the doctor?" "Yes, baby," Tivona said. "We are." She believed it when she said it. She needed to believe it. She took out her phone. Not to call anyone. There was no one to call. Not really, not for this. Her mother was in Kumasi. Her friend Denise started her shift at 6 and didn't get off until 6 in the evening. There was no cavalry coming. There was just Tivona and a phone and the habit, learned over years of solving problems alone, of doing something when you felt powerless. Because doing something, anything, was the only way she knew to keep herself from sinking. She opened her email. She typed. She did not know who would read it, or if anyone would. She typed to the clinic's general contact address, the one listed on their website, because it was the only thing she could think of to do. She wrote 3 sentences. She told them her daughter's name and her daughter's age, and the number of days she had been sick. She told them the temperature outside. She hit send. Then she put her phone in her pocket and pulled Lila's collar up around her ears. Inside the clinic, in the private office with the frosted glass, Dr. O.C. Mills was reviewing a file when her tablet chimed with a forwarded email. Her assistant, a young man named Kwabena, not this clinic's Kwabena, a different Kwabena entirely, her nephew, who had interned here last summer and set up her email system before he left, had flagged certain keywords on incoming messages. One of those keywords was daughter. One was cough. One was outside. All 3 appeared in Tivona's 3 sentences. Dr. Renata Ose Mills had been running this clinic for 11 years. She had studied at McGill, trained in Toronto, turned down a position at a hospital in London because she wanted to build something of her own in the city where she'd grown up. She had built it. It was not a large thing, but it was hers, and it stood for something, or it was supposed to. She read the email once. Then she stood up. She walked through the hall, past the exam rooms, past the cabinet where they kept the pediatric supplies, and she stopped at the reception desk. "Where is the woman with the little girl?" she asked. The receptionist looked up. "She didn't have a valid health card. I didn't ask about the health card. I asked where she is." A pause. "I asked her to wait outside." Dr. O.C. Mills looked at the woman across the desk for a long moment. The kind of look that does not need words to carry its full weight. Then she walked to the front door and opened it. Tivona was still on the bench. She was rubbing her hand up and down Lila's back in slow circles, and Lila had gone quiet in the particular way of children who are conserving energy. The elephant was in Lila's lap. Tivona's coat was not thick enough for -8. She had dressed for the bus, for the indoors, for a waiting room. Ms. Asare. Dr. O.C. Mills pulled her own coat tighter. "I'm Dr. O.C. Mills. Please come inside." Tivona looked up. Something crossed her face. Not relief exactly, not yet, because she had learned not to soften until she was sure. "Your receptionist." "I know what my receptionist said. I'm asking you to come inside." Inside, the waiting room settled into a new kind of quiet. The man with the coffee cup looked at the floor. A mother across the room met Tivona's eyes briefly, then looked away. Dr. O.C. Mills brought them to an exam room herself. She washed her hands. She knelt down so she was at Lila's level, and she said, "Hi there, what's your friend's name?" Lila looked at the elephant. "Kwame. Kwame is a good strong name." The doctor smiled. "Can I listen to your chest while you hold Kwame?" Lila looked at her mother. Tivona nodded. Lila held out her arm. 20 minutes later, Dr. O.C. Mills straightened up. She wrote on a pad, "It's bacterial, not viral. Bacterial. She needs antibiotics. 10 days. You'll want to pick them up today." She tore off the prescription and held it out. Tivona took it. She looked at it the way you look at something you've been waiting for, making sure it's real before you put any weight on it. "How much is today's visit? We'll sort out the billing once your card comes through. Service Ontario can take longer than they say. I want to pay. You can pay when you have a card, or we can work out something. But right now, that little girl needs antibiotics, and the pharmacy on Brunswick is open until 8. The doctor paused. "Are you all right?" It was such a simple question. It was such an unusual question to be asked in a place like this. Tivona said, "Yes," the way you say yes when the correct answer is more complicated than the moment has room for. Dr. O.C. Mills nodded, and she knew. "I'll walk you back out." At the reception desk, she stopped. The receptionist looked up. "Going forward," Dr. O.C. Mills said, not loudly, but in the particular register that carries through every corner of a small room. If a parent comes in with a sick child and a Service Ontario confirmation letter, that child is seen. I don't care about the billing timeline. We see them first and sort the paperwork after. That is not new policy. That is the policy we've always had, which I apparently need to make clearer." The receptionist said nothing, and the chairs in the waiting room, the doctor continued, are for anyone who is cold and needs to sit down. That has also always been our policy. She said it the way people say things when they know the room is listening, when the words are meant to travel. Tivona settled Lila on her hip. Lila, who had allowed the doctor to press a stethoscope to her chest and hadn't cried once, and she walked toward the door. At the threshold she stopped, not because she meant to, but because something in the moment caught her. She turned back. "Thank you," she said, not to the room, to the doctor. Dr. O.C. Mills raised a hand, briefly, the way you wave to someone you expect to see again soon. "Now, about those SUVs. 3 days later, on a Friday morning, the Harrington Clinic's parking strip saw something it had never seen before. A convoy of 3 black vehicles, government plates, with 2 men in suits and a woman in heels preceding a delegation from the Toronto District Health Authority, the same authority whose community health access grant the clinic had applied for, twice, without success, and whose board was currently reviewing whether to expand their funding mandate to include independent clinics in underserved urban catchments. The woman in heels was the authority's new director of community health partnerships. Her name was Adwoa. No, wait, different name. Her name was Renee Fortin, actually, which matters less than what she was carrying under her arm. A file folder with the clinic's name on it, and inside that folder, attached to a board recommendation, a flagged letter that had been forwarded to the authority's general inbox 3 days ago. 3 sentences. A sick child. A temperature of -8. Someone on the authority's public affairs team had flagged it. Someone else had cross-referenced it with the clinic's existing application. A third person had brought it to Director Fortin, who had a daughter of her own, 8 years old, and who had read those 3 sentences on a Thursday afternoon and sat with them for a moment before picking up her phone. It is not always the loudest noise that moves things. Sometimes it is the smallest, clearest signal sent into the right silence at exactly the right time. Director Fortin walked through the clinic's front door. She shook Dr. O.C. Mills's hand. She asked to see the records of the previous week's patient flow, which the doctor provided. She asked about the billing backlog for patients with pending health cards. She looked around the waiting room, the 6 chairs, the children's corner, the bare maple visible through the front window, and she said, "This is what community medicine is supposed to look like." The grant, when it came through 6 weeks later, was 3 times what the clinic had originally applied for. Tivona didn't know about any of that. She knew that the antibiotics cost $42 and that she'd borrowed $30 from Denise to cover it, and that by the following Tuesday, Lila's cough had gone quiet for the first time in a month. She knew that she'd gone back to the clinic the week after to pay what she owed and to drop off the official health card renewal confirmation, which had finally arrived by mail on a Wednesday with a new card inside it. She knew that the receptionist, a different one this time, a young man with a friendly face, had taken her card, processed it, and smiled at Lila when she walked past. She knew that on that second visit, Dr. O.C. Mills had come out of her office and stopped in the hall and said, "Ms. Asare, how is Lila?" "She's good," Tivona said. "She finished the antibiotics. She's back at school." "Good," the doctor said. "You did the right thing pushing for an appointment." Tivona thought about that. On the bus home, Lila asleep against her arm, the wooden elephant tucked in the front pocket of the grocery tote. She thought about what it meant to be told you did the right thing, when the thing you'd done was simply refuse to stop asking for what your daughter needed. It shouldn't have required courage. It was just a question. Just a government letter and a bench in November, and 3 sentences sent into a general inbox. And yet, Lila stirred. She pressed her face against her mother's sleeve and made the small sound she made when she was dreaming. Tivona looked out the bus window at the city going past, the storefronts, the bare trees, the people walking with their shoulders up against the wind. She pulled her daughter a little closer. There are things you do because you have no choice, and there are things you do because you're the only one who will. Most of the time, those are the same thing. And you don't know. When you're sitting on a cold bench in November sending an email to no one in particular, that somewhere inside a building a tablet is chiming, and a doctor is standing up from her desk. You just send it. That's the whole of it, really. You just send it. If you believe a child deserves to be warm, drop your city in the comments below. Tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. And if no one has told you today that you did the right thing, I'm telling you now.